Well, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be in Scotland. It's a country that I've visited on many occasions, but never for work purposes before. So that, in a sense, is slightly unfortunate. However, it's very important that my colleagues and I come to take evidence in Scotland, because I know that many people in Scotland were adversely affected by the Horizon IT system, as were people in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So I'm very grateful to everyone in Scotland who's made a witness statement, and I'm very grateful to those who have made a witness statement who have agreed to come to give oral evidence, having been invited by B to do so. So with those introductory words, I will now hand over to Mr. Beer, Queen's Counsel, who is counsel to the inquiry, who will begin today's proceedings.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And your assessors. Can we hear first, please, from Mr. Vinod Sharma? May he be sworn.
Yes.
Repeat after me. I swear by Gita
I swear by Gita
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Please take a seat, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell the chair your full name, please?
My name is Vinod Kumar Sharma.
And in front of you, there should be on the table a document entitled First Witness Statement of Vinod Sharma.
I have with me, yes.
Thank you. And can you take that up and look at the last page?
Yes, I have checked the last page, and that's my signature, and I've signed it.
Thank you. And can you tell us whether the contents of the statement are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
The contents of the statement are true to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you
and
very
my
much.
feelings, of course.
Now, can you tell us how old you are, please, Mr. Sharma?
I am now approaching 75.
And can you tell us something about your family, please?
My family obviously goes background. I came to UK in 1957 with my father, and we moved to Ireland and stayed there for about 4 years. And my father was financially struggling, obviously first immigrant in the country, and we then moved to Glasgow in 1961, where he got a job in the buses. As you know, a lot of immigrants worked in the buses. And from there, I was then about 16. I was 10 and a half, 11 when I came to this country. Probably missed the primary educations, which is probably the basis of a good education. Although I was in school in India, I was quite good at mathematics or arithmetic at that time, that was known. And I progressed there. And at 16, I went to an engineering college, David Dale Engineering College. I did a year's at the college and served as an apprentice, got an apprenticeship and served as an apprentice as what they called an armature winding. It's
Armature winding?
Armature winding. It's an electrical motor that produces electricity or power, any kind of motor, and these have coils in it that sometimes get burned out and needing repaired. So there was an engineering section of electrical engineering,
Okay.
and I did that as a trade.
And are you a married man?
I'm a married man with 2 boys.
How old are your boys?
One of my boys is approaching 50 in September, and the other one's 48. One stays in the US, in Arizona, and the other one stays in Glasgow, or just in the suburb of Glasgow.
And how long have you lived in Glasgow?
I have lived in Glasgow since 1961.
Now, we're going to hear that you became a sub-postmaster in 1977.
I became a sub-postmaster in 77. Obviously, after I did my apprenticeship, family finances were still reasonably tight, and decided to get a shop, as most immigrants did at that time. I got a small shop, progressed from there to another shop.
And was that a newsagent's?
That was a newsagent. And in 1977, And where I lived, just about 400 yards, there was a sub-post office. The postmaster was retiring, and I had an opportunity to go for that post office.
Whereabouts was that?
That's in Bishopbriggs, the post office is in Balornock, Glasgow, and I stayed in Bishopbriggs, which was just across the road. And the post office was in a deprived housing scheme.
So there came a time in 77 when you decided to move from the newsagent's convenience store
to a post office and a convenience store attached together.
And why was that? Why did you decide to become a sub-postmaster?
Well, I was a young lad of just in my 30. I was 30-year-old. And obviously I was looking to progress, make a financial background standing for my family, obviously my immediate family, but also my related family, because we lived in a joint system because we were the first immigrants in this country. And there was an opportunity there to acquire the post office, which at that time was a reasonably good salary. You had to work for it, but also a business which was generating income as well.
Okay, so there was the possibility of achieving a steady income.
A possibility of achieving a steady income, yes, definitely so.
And what about the fact that it was a continuation of part of the employment that you got already, i.e. running a store?
Yeah, well, this was a part of the obviously it's the way the post office model worked. Mostly, you have a convenience store and a post office, and there was a remuneration paid by the post office for the transactions that you did, and this is how we were paid.
And what was your view of the standing or status of sub-postmasters at that time?
At that particular time, the public perception of working for the post office was really high. I soon learned that you were well respected so long as you worked with the community and helping the community, because the local community has its own local needs. If a sub-postmaster was involved in the community, he got respect. He was respected. People came on to them for any issues that they had, and obviously at the same time you were making a steady living from the post office and the shop.
So you became the sub-postmaster of 48 Brompton Road in Glasgow?
Yes, I became the postmaster in 1977, September. I think it was September 1977.
And tell us what kind of post office was it? How big? How many counters?
This was a very small post office. It only had only one main counter at that time, and then a retail shop to it.
Now, we're going to hear that from September 77 until your retirement in August 2015,
That's,
you worked as a...
I think it was August or September, yes. Yeah, 2015, yeah.
You worked as a sub-postmaster, so you gave 38 years by my calculations of your life to the post office.
I gave 38 years to my life, which was definitely originally was a good way of earning a living and a reasonable financial living, initially anyway, to working in the post office.
And who else worked in the post office?
I had the post office, I had an assistant, my wife, and I had a shop assistant in the retail side.
So in the post office side, how long did the assistant work for you?
The assistant worked for about 24 hours. About 4 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Okay, so 24 hours a week rather than a day.
And I did the rest, yeah.
Okay. And for how many years did he or she work?
Well, I had various assistants, but the first one worked for me for about 15 years.
And was there always an assistant throughout the 30?
There has always been an assistant because obviously I had a retail shop to look after. I needed to get away from the post office counter to do my chores in the retail side, mother to go to cash and carries, etc., get goods, provisions for the shop. So there always was an assistant, and if sometimes she couldn't be there, my wife would man the post office.
And when you became a sub-postmaster in 1977, was there an existing sub-postmaster who handed over to you?
There was an existing sub-postmistress who handed over the post office to me, yes.
And did they run an accounting system?
The accounting system we ran at that particular time, which was carried on myself, was more a manual system, whereas every transaction was noted down, or a docket is produced for every transaction, and it was noted down and obviously compiled for the weekly accounting.
And so by a manual system, you mean with paper and a pen or pencil?
Yeah.
And can you just explain shortly, if you can, the way that the manual system works?
Well, the way the manual system worked, you had, at that particular time, the post office it didn't have a lot of diversification as the post office has today. It basically, all you did was making payment for the government, whether it's through gyro or pensions or pension credits, etc., and also selling stamps in the Royal Mail. That was the main work at that particular time. And if you were making a payment for the pensions, you were presented a pension book. Obviously, you look at the pension book and check that you know the person has got the right pension, but you know the person is genuine, well, that belongs to that person. You date stamped the pension.
It's my fault for a bad question. What I meant was, how would you, using the manual system, make the books balance?
Well, okay, basically, we would take all the payments, all the dockets for the payments, write them all down on a sheet, add them up on an adding machine, and attach them together as total payments made. And we did the same with the gyros.
Yes.
And the postage stamps were, obviously, they were all postage stamps. They weren't labels. You had a opening stock in the postage, and you took stock of your postage again with the closing stock, and that gave you the figure for the total postage used.
And how frequently would you balance?
We would balance once a week. Every Friday it was that time, Friday night.
And when you did the balancing, did you ever encounter any shortfalls? This is using the manual system.
Yeah, definitely. When we did the balance that time, we had shortfalls.
What kind of order of shortfalls?
Maybe £30, £40, something like that, and but quite often you found you'd maybe left what they call a terra docket out of the book, which you wrote down. You'd left it in the book by mistake. And the following week, when the person would come in, you would see, oh, there it is. That's there's a docket. She's had her pension. She'll say she's had her pension, but you left the docket in the book. So you would take that and then reclaim that particular week. That would make up the losses and the post. So sometime you probably maybe did pay out, occasionally paid out £5, £10 too much by mistake. That could easily happen when you're handling cash all the time, especially. Post office was a very cash-intensified business because it was just, especially in the housing scheme, you're just handing money out all the time, and you did occasionally make mistakes, and you carried the mistakes. That was fine. It was part of life.
When you say you carried the mistake, do you mean you
made good? You made good. We had to make good. That was an definite understanding that you were responsible for all the cash that wasn't there.
But under this manual system, they were always very small amounts of money.
Very small amount of money. Yeah.
And did it ever happen the other way round, that under the manual system there were excesses?
Oh yeah, sometimes what actually happens is you could probably make a mistake in your accounting for postage more than anything else, not anything else. And the following week you would probably say, well, listen, I was £12 over last week, but the postage it's now adjusted itself and it's worked out fine, so that was it.
When you were using this manual system, did the post office ever conduct audits of your branch? Yeah,
originally post office they audited once a year, but over the years it dwindled down to once every 5 years, 4 years. You hardly ever seen anybody unless it was a real issue.
And under the manual system, were ever any issues identified in the course of these audits?
Not really. There was no great issues because it was quite straightforward. You had a docket, you had your post office, you had your gyro payment, and you accounted everything. There was really no. Well, it was a faultless system in a way. It was really because the work wasn't so diversified either. So the manual system was quite good.
Can we turn then to the introduction of the Horizon system?
Sure, yes.
Can you remember when it was introduced into your branch?
Well, the Horizon system was introduced in 1999 or thereabouts. By that time, the pensions the pensions books started having a barcode. So when a customer came in, you got your gun and you scan the barcode, that particular person's name came up, and you punched in the amount, and you still took the docket out, and you handed it, and that carried on for about 3 or 4 years. And after about 4 years, it became more sophisticated. There was no pension books. People had, when the card system was introduced, money was going into people's card accounts. Everybody was asked or forced to open a card account with the post office every use, and the money, and they came in with a card, like the chip and pin card, and they operated, and that's where I felt we really lost everything. There was no way of reconciling what you paid out in terms of individual payments. You had to take the word of the machine or the computer program, what it says, what you should have left at the cash at the end of the day, and what you've paid out.
When the system went live in 1999 for you, before then, did you receive any training on the use of the Horizon
There
system?
was about 2 days of training on the Horizon, which is quite inadequate.
Whereabouts was that? Was that in branch or out?
In branch.
In your branch?
In branch, a girl would come in for about 2 days, from about 8:30, 9 o'clock till 5:30. And
Did you think it was inadequate at the time? Or is it now, looking back?
At the time, it was definitely inadequate, because obviously with systems like that, you have to work at it to get to know it. I mean, although on the tail end of it, you balance up quite quickly because you were used to the system, you were working. But initially, you would spend hours at the night trying to balance up, trying to work the system, and the procedures you had to go through to balance up. It took a lot of time. But
By the time the system went live, did you feel qualified to use the system?
no, it took about a year and a bit to say yes, I could do the balance with the system with confidence, rather than, you know, God, what's happening here? What's happening here? Is that right? Is that right? Or am I doing the right step? Let me phone somebody else up and see if I'm going through the system right and doing it.
Were you trained what to do if the system showed a shortfall?
Well, you weren't trained. You were just told to phone the helpline.
That was the solution.
That was the solution.
Anything else?
No.
You say in paragraph 12 of your witness statement, it was expected that any shortfall would have to be paid out of my own pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Who said that to you?
I don't physically remember anybody saying it to me orally, but it was quite clear over the years of practice. Any shortfall was the responsibility of the sub-postmaster. And I think you'll find every sub-postmaster in the country will tell you that any shortfall the system shows is the responsibility of the sub-postmaster, and you have to make it good.
And so this wasn't something that was specifically said in relation to Horizon, this was just a continuation.
This is a continuation since 1977.
You go on to say, I was always told that there was no error, and then I think, and no error could be made whilst using the Horizon system.
Yes.
When was that said?
I think that was said at the beginning, way back in 2003, 2004, when it all went live, totally when the books were abolished, the pension book, the card account came in. We were led to believe that the system is it's faultless. It's been tried and tested. I'm not sure whether it was the Australian Post Office tried that system first.
And in what context was this being said to you, that there were no errors, or errors couldn't be made?
When you maybe got a shortfall of maybe £100 or £200, you would phone the helpline and say, listen, I've looked through all this. I can't find it. I'm £112 short. And they say, well, listen, somebody's done something wrong. They've either paid out, the money's gone missing. You have to make it good. There's nothing wrong with the system.
You go on to say in that paragraph, I was told that the system was working properly. Was this when you raised shortfall issues with the helpline?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And was that the message that you always got back from?
We always got that message, even through the Federation. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, I used to attend certain Federation meetings, and it was the kind of stories you're hearing now was never aired in any of the Federation meetings that they're having problems with the system. Never aired. And
so for those not as familiar as all of us with what you mean by the Federation, tell us what the Federation is.
We had what they call a Subpost Masters Federation. It's like the Post Office Union, Workers Union, people who run the post office. And obviously, I'm in Glasgow. I've been in Glasgow since I was 11, Clydeside. Strong union links, not necessarily leftist views, but people standing up for their rights. And I was always in favour of a union because we could, if we had certain demands, whether it's pay demands or working hours, we could go through the union, go through the post office. But it was, unfortunately, it was pointless. The Federation was there in name, but it was definitely not there for the sub-postmasters.
So in this context, the issue of the operation of the Horizon system and Shortfalls, are you saying they told you as well that the system was working properly?
Well, I mean, it was not, nobody actually stood up clearly. When you talk to people one-to-one basis, and they say, no, the system's fine, it's gone missing, somebody's stolen it, or somebody's paid out too much, and basically you were left with, it says, oh, that's it.
Now, after the introduction of the Horizon system in your branch, you experienced shortfalls.
Well, I experienced shortfalls, maybe not to a great extent, but sometimes maybe a few £100.
But how soon after the introduction of Horizon into the branch was that?
I think it happened sort of intermittently, but it started happening about maybe every so often. I mean, I can't really put a time to it, but you did occasionally have losses. That system showed that you were carrying less cash than you should be, which is considered a loss.
Okay. And so just to explain that, again, for anyone watching that doesn't realise, would it show where the loss had occurred?
It wouldn't show. It would just show cash holding short.
So there'd be a bottom line with...
Bottom line, you would look at the cash, and you would look at the cash you've entered in, that you're holding in stock in the system, and you look at the cash the system so you should have. If two didn't marry up, you were short.
And so there was just a bottom line which said you should have £10,000.
Yeah, a bottom line, and then if you put in what you were holding, and it showed you're short. If you were balanced, it should maybe, I mean, you could never get the system to balance perfectly. It's always £10, £15 this way and that way. But you carried that. We used to be, since 1977, we used to be carrying that this is what happens. If it's short, you've got to put it in.
And by carry, you don't mean carry over to the next?
You do. Sometimes if you had a large shortage, maybe £400, £500, £300, you would phone the helpline, and they would say, obviously, it used to be on a Friday night. We did come to a bit of Wednesday balance, but Friday night, ordinary folk, everybody wants to shut shop and go home. Yeah. But you as a sub-postmaster was sitting there raking your hours to about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock Friday night, couldn't get anywhere. You'd maybe phone the helpline earlier on, and they would just say, well, listen, if it's not there, you could leave it and it'll come, maybe it'll show up later in the system where the system would maybe show that it would correct itself. You wouldn't really see a physical input of cash, but it would correct itself. It would show up and that would correct the error. But if it didn't come through, hence 6-8 weeks later, you got a notice through, what they call an error notice. You got an error notice through. Please make good for a week 12, £270. There was no right of recourse. You just had to put it in.
And so there, you would put your hand in your pocket and make good the £270.
Well, obviously, you put your hand in your pocket, you take a checkbook out from your account, and you'd put it in and say, well, that's it, gone.
Did, as a result of any calls that you made to the helpline, anyone ever come to the branch to investigate?
Not immediately, no. Never.
You say in paragraph 16 of your statement, I was led to believe by the helpline that any error was a mistake on my part.
Well, that's what we're always led to believe. It was not my part in particular, but part of my office, which we were responsible for.
So it was down to you in branch.
It was me down to my branch, and I being the sub-postmaster, was held responsible for all that.
Now, we're going to speak in a moment about a very large shortfall,
Sure.
some £28,845,
That's right, yeah.
that was shown as a shortfall on the system in June 2015.
That's right, yeah.
Before then, before June 2015 and the large shortfall, had you ever experienced any such large shortfall?
No, nothing like that. Maybe £100, £200, which sometimes occasionally did happen. You just swallowed the pill and made it good and moved on your daily routine and said, well, this is, if it's not showing up, you've got to put it in and move on. But on that particular occasion, shall I?
We're going to come to that
Sure.
now.
So that's okay, that's fine, yeah.
Tell us about the occasion of the very large shortfall.
Yeah.
Were you in the branch at the time?
I wasn't in the branch.
Where were you?
I was on holiday in America.
And how long had you gone away for?
I had originally planned to go away for 4 weeks. My son, who's married and settled in America, hadn't seen him for a number of years. I had built some annual leave up and decided to go to America in beginning of June. And I left my girl in charge. She had made herself available, and she was very competent. As I said, she was 100% competent.
And at that stage, how long had that lady worked for you?
Well, she'd worked for about 24 years, 24, 25 years. I mean, to be honest, I think she was more competent than myself on that system. You know, she was really clued in. She knew how to do it. She could do her work and finish in a reasonable time, and she was very confident.
So no, you said you got a call. Who called you?
Well, my son originally called me in Arizona and said, "Dad, we've got a problem with the post office." And I said, "Oh my God, has there been a hold-up?" Or something? He said, "No."
You mean a robbery?
A robbery. Yeah. He says, there's a shortage in the system. It's showing shortage of about £29,000. I said, that can't be right. He said, what do you want to do? So I phoned I have a personal friend who's a secretary of the Federation of our particular branch.
Just before you come on to your contact with your friend in the Federation, before you went away to Arizona, was there a shortfall showing then?
There was no shortfall showing there. It was done at the end of May, and there was no shortfall showing there.
Okay, and so it hadn't been building up and building up and building up?
No, nothing at all, no.
This came out of the clear blue sky?
Just came out of the blue sky, yeah.
And at this time, by the time you had gone to Arizona in June, had you already made a decision to retire?
I had made a decision to retire. Post office in the last maybe 10, 15 years have been what they call rebranding. They call it rebranding, but basically what they were doing was paying people off, buying their contract, and getting replacements to come in who were, I could say, fool enough to come in for a lower remuneration than you were paying before. Although they maybe changed some of the signs, but they will call it rebranding. But that was that was the way they were working forward. They've done that twice before. So I had put in for retirement, say, listen, I want to retire. And the person who now runs the retail side of the shop is willing to take over.
And had you got an estimated lump sum pension figure in mind by then?
Yeah, but by that time, over the years of service, the way they calculated the lump sum was based on the last 3 years of salary, which I felt a wee bit grieved because over the years the salary remuneration had come down every year. You know, rather than going up, it was come down, and they would always say, well, your retail side should it was like what they call it, the filling station, retail petrol filling stations. The petrol retailing doesn't make any money, but they expect the shop, which are to generate the money to support the filling station. And the post office were using the same analogy, expecting the shop to support the post office.
In any event, you've got a figure in mind. What was the figure?
So the figure was about £22,000. Sorry, £52,000. That was my retirement figure for
a lump sum payment.
For a lump sum payment, and that was being paid to me because the present owner of the retail side was willing to take the post office over, obviously at half what I was getting for it in terms of salary.
And had you planned to retire, as we know you did in the August?
So I had applied for retirement maybe about a year before that, and my turn came to retire that year. We weren't sure about the exact date, but it was quite imminent that by June, when I was going away, I was going to retire in the next couple of months.
Anyway, you got this call, you're in Arizona,
Yeah.
from your son saying, Dad, there's £29,000
Yeah.
shown as a shortfall.
Yeah.
You were telling us that you contacted a friend in the Federation.
I contacted a friend who's also the branch secretary of the Federation, of the branch, of a particular branch in Glasgow.
What was his name?
His name was Sunil Sood. And also, he was a friend with another colleague who was an ex-Subpost master, whose name was Vijay Lakhanpal. They went into the branch, and as like any auditors, they just did an audit, and the sum showed the sum was £29,000, nearly £29,000 short.
You're still in Arizona at this
I was
point.
still in Arizona. They phoned me and said, Vinod, the money's not there as is shown. And so that particular time, they say, well, the only place somebody's taken the money. I says, £29,000 in used notes, not £20 and £50 notes. It's a bundle that size. It just can't disappear. They said, well, as far as the figures show, your post office is £29,000 short. So there, and that's where this went. So there, I immediately decided to cut short my holiday and return to Glasgow.
Now, in your witness statement, in paragraph 21, you say, in shock and worried because I was abroad, I contacted my union representative, George Thompson, to look into the issue.
Yeah, no, sorry. It should probably say through the branch secretary contacted the union secretary.
So who did you contact first?
I contacted Sunil Sood, who was a branch secretary in Glasgow.
Yes.
He, as I said, he, with Vijay Lakhanpal, went in and did the audit, found the money was short, and then immediately decided to return to Glasgow. There was nothing that I could do, nothing I could say. There was no evidence where the money could have gone, but we did have a CCTV in the shop.
If we can just come to that in a moment.
Sure.
What had George Thompson got to do with it?
Well, George Thompson I had a meeting with George Thompson after I'd come back to Glasgow.
Was he a Federation representative?
He was the president of the Federation. So, after I came back to Glasgow, my union rep, Sunil Sood, secretary, contacted George Thompson, who had agreed to come and meet me within a couple of days
Yes.
of me coming to Glasgow.
So just to make clear, you terminated your holiday early and came
Oh
back.
yeah, definitely. I bought a fresh ticket for £1,100 because on the spot, when you go and buy a ticket straight away, they charge you an arm and a leg. When I was going over, I only paid about £500 for a return. A single cost me £1,100 at that time. I had no option except to pay that.
So you came back, I think in your statement you said after about 10 days.
Yeah, well, I came back after 10 days being on holiday, yeah.
And you have been told by your two colleagues that their audit of the system had shown indeed the shortfall.
There was a
And you had a meeting with the president, George Thompson.
No, they didn't. I had a meeting with the president.
Yes.
Yeah, uh-huh.
And what happened at that meeting?
Well, that particular meeting, I met George Thompson, was in one of the hotels in Glasgow, and I had met him once or twice before, but not one-to-one basis, but I knew of him. I don't think he knew of me. He probably said, well, okay, that's supposed to answer for Brompton Road sub-office. So I sat down and we talked about it. I said, George, that's not possible. The money's, it can't be short. I have watched 10 days of CCTV, and that kind of money did not leave the post office. Spent hours watching CCTV. to see if there was any activities that could go on. Well, obviously, you're under suspicion of anybody and everybody. And George Thompson said, well, he says, basically, what's going to happen, Vinod, they're going to come. Post office was never very, very quick. They were, you know, you think they were £30,000 short, they were down the next day. They were never that quick. They took their own pace. He said, they're going to come down. First of all, they'll suspend you because the money's short. As far as they're concerned, you're responsible, and you're showing around about £30,000 short. They'll suspend you. I said, what do you mean? He said, they'll suspend you and close the office. But he said, the scenario for you is, if they suspend you and close the office, they'll never open the office again. This thing will drag out so far. In the end, you will lose your payoff, and they will pursue you for the money. He said they're quite relentless, and he says, basically, if you're prepared to go all through that, and they'll have the police on their side, they've got their own forces, they've got their own legal teams, they'll just sue you for the money, and you may be convicted and charged, and you'll lose your pension, you'll lose your retirement lump sum you're going to get. He said, I can't offer you anything else. I can't suggest anything else. If you can afford to put it in, then at least you'll get your retirement sum.
So in the face of the suggestion that you would be suspended, you would lose your...
Very much so. I think it happened in most places where people have a large shortfall, they're suspended. But my case was I could be suspended, I could be taken through a third degree by the police, by the post office investigation team, this, that and the other. And in the end, if I've got the money, they will still pursue me for the money, whether they could prove it or not, because I'm responsible for the cash. But the fact was that they would close the office, I would lose my retirement pension, and my retirement payoff.
So there was the suspension, there was the being sued for the shortfall, and the loss of the retirement lump sum.
That's right, yeah.
Faced with those three, what did you do?
Well, basically, I went home. I was in a state of shock. I've been through a lot in life, in terms of working, finance, whatever. And I said to my wife, I said, local people, obviously when the post office is closed for a day or so, the word does get out, no matter how hard you try to keep it in. Nobody ever suspected that Lorraine or myself had taken the cash. But that's not enough for the post office. So I said to my wife, I said, look, we know Lorraine hasn't taken it. The money's disappeared, we don't know how. But I'm not prepared to go through the third degree of inquiry with the police, with the investigation team, turning the whole place upside down, turning the whole house upside down, and then still having to put the money in. So I decided that I would gather in the money from my resources, my mother and father's, and my brother helped out as well, and put the money in, and just call it part of life. It's happened in life, nothing I can do about it. The only redeeming factor was there was a lump sum coming in the immediate future, and I would pay that back to the people who have borrowed money from, which eventually I did.
But you lost more than half of your retirement sum.
Yeah, I lost about 30,000. Then the audit, sorry.
We're going to come to the £700 in a moment.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
So I lost more than half of it to that, my lump sum, my retirement lump sum, to that shortfall.
If you just take open your witness statement, please, and look at page 5, and it's paragraph 24.
Yeah.
You say, I was led to believe that I had no alternative but to pay the shortfalls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who led you to believe that you had no alternative but to pay the shortfalls?
But that's probably an understanding since 1977, since I took a post office, because any shortfall you were responsible for. I mean, it was, I can't categorically say somebody actually said for that particular, but it was always the case. Obviously, before it was small amounts, maybe £100, £200, maybe £70 over every so often. But that was always a led belief that we accepted that. And I think most postmasters will tell you that they were held responsible for the shortfall, because the fact that the way the post office auditors team and their legal team and their investigating team go in to the Subpost, because you hear some stories how they go in, how they're ruthless, and they make life quite miserable, but then the people still have to put the money in.
You say in paragraph 26, and I just want to concentrate on some of the language you use, I repaid the post office in full for this shortfall from my bank account. Of course, you were not repaying money at all, were you?
Well,
because the money had never been paid to you in the first place, had it?
Well, basically, as I said before, you're led to believe you're responsible for it. So, because I'm responsible for it, I have to repay that into my pay into the post office to balance my books.
And is that how you saw it, that you were repaying, even though
I never took it. Yeah,
you never took it in the first. You were never paid it in the first place.
And I never got paid for it. But as the system said I should have it, so I had to repay because the system showed that there was a shortfall in the cash.
Now, I think subsequently, after you paid the sum of £28,845, there was an audit conducted.
There was an audit conducted about 5 or 6 days afterwards. 2 girls came to the post office. As I said, they were it wasn't as if it was a shortfall showing in the system, somebody would come down the next day, or even in the afternoon the next day and say, listen, shut the post office, we want to do an audit and see what the situation. They turned up about 5 or 6 days later. 2 ladies came from the post office and did an audit. I knew them both. One actually helped me out sometime in the past when I was stuck for staff, and they used to call me Victor, and so they did the audit.
Why did they call you Victor?
Pardon?
Why did they call you Victor?
Well, basically, I worked to be, don't take this the wrong way, I worked in a local underprivileged housing scheme, and people got to know you by first names. Vinod was quite difficult for everybody to pronounce, so they just called me Victor.
Okay.
That's the way life was.
Okay.
So and she said, Vic, she goes, Vic, the money's gone. You're in America. I was balanced up on the end of May. She's probably taken it. Point indicating to the girl who was Lorraine.
To Lorraine.
Yeah. The girl wasn't there, but she said she's probably taken it. I said, away. I said, it's gone.
And did you believe that Lorraine had taken the money?
No, not at all. Not at all. Listen, Lorraine, as I say, I trusted Lorraine probably more than my family in terms of work ethics. Lorraine was a very hard-working, very sincere person who'd worked with me for about 25 years. I never ever had a problem with Lorraine. So much so I could leave her when I go on holiday and she'd be in charge and everything would be fine.
Now, did this audit, despite the payment of the 28,845, show another shortfall?
Another shortage of about £700 or something like that.
£700.
Yeah, £700.
You say in your statement.
£60. And again, they were there. They're the auditors. They're the gods. So she goes, you have to make this good before we go away.
And so what did you do?
Pulled the checkbook out, wrote another check.
For £700?
£700 odd, yeah. And the other check had been cashed for the £29,000 odd. And the 700 was in stock and in hold for the made payable to the post office. They were quite happy. So that was, as far as they were concerned, the matter's closed. There was no case to pursue for the 29,000 because I'd made it good. And subsequently, my retirement came a month or so, a couple of months later. And
so you retired as planned in August 2015?
Yeah.
In terms of the impact that this had on you, you'd obviously lost £28,845 and £700
Yeah.
at the point of your retirement after you'd worked for the post office for 38 years.
38 long years. You know, it's a lifetime. Especially, you know, when I was a young lad, 30-year-old, who'd come to this country, struggled, and started making a living, and suddenly I get this post office. I actually believed at that particular time this was a job with the government. Little did I know the government suited themselves. You were self-employed when they wanted you to be, and you were employed when they wanted you to be. You know, totally a unique situation, because they paid the full national insurance as an employer, which meant you were employed by the post office, which was a government-owned body. But you weren't employed by the post office because as an employee, you would have other sort of pensionable rights as well. It would never existed. Even today, you still get, maybe not today, but you get postmen who maybe 75, 80-year-old up in the Highlands, still got a wee they're working away for a living, for diminishing wage, which is getting minimal every year. It's absolutely lunacy.
So at this time, you were in your late 60s. Did this cause you worry and concern?
It did cause me worry and concern. Obviously, when you're getting late on in life, and you really, you know, nowadays people, well, even I suppose not even nowadays, people, when they get to their 60s, they start saying, "Oh, what about my pension? I've not put anything by for my pension." You know, this happens too late in life, as you know now. People don't think about this in their 30s, and suddenly you say, "Well, gee, what am I going to do? I'm only going to be left with a retirement pension." Luckily, because the salary was, and the national insurance was paid by the post office, the pension is of reasonable, the government pension is of a reasonable level, but there was no post office, and there was no works pension. So, and then I said, well, okay, I've got this coming in, the 50-odd thousand I'm going to get, but that's before the shortfall. I could probably manage, because I had done reasonably well in life. My house was by then paid for, so I had no mortgage. My family had grown up. My boys were not dependent on me. They were moving on in life. So I felt I could, well, I'm getting 67. My knees are giving me a wee bit of bother, but I'll manage. But then suddenly, you're going to be another 20, 30,000 pounds short. It really left a bad feeling, really horrible feeling that you've been left with this legacy of a shortfall, and you're going to be less cash than you have. But you take life as it comes and say, well, it's okay, I'll get by.
You say in your statement the effects of the shortfall had a devastating effect on my life. I spent many months of sleepless nights due to this. Is that right?
Oh, that's true. I mean, you know, in a small household, me and my wife, and we're sitting there, suddenly all that money gone missing. It's not money you can save that easy. And you do tend to wake up in the middle of the night and say, God, what am I going to do? What's happened? What can we do? But with sense and good conviction, you sort of soldier on, but you do suffer a lot. You know, how could this happen to me? You know, after being in there so many years, and I was quite reasonably popular with the local community as well.
In fact, as a result of the action that you took, did this not leak out into the local community that there had been a shortfall?
No, it leaked out to the local community there was a shortfall. There was a problem at the post office. But people were very supportive of us. I never one person would even say to me that money went from your office, did you take it? That's the kind of thing you expect people to say, you know, but nobody, I mean, I could still go up there today, even after away from there for 8 years, and people would still respect me. I don't mean respect them to bow to me, but they would still hold me in regards.
Now, you, I think, participated in the group litigation against the post office that followed.
Yeah.
You weren't a lead claimant, but you were one of the claimants,
I was
that
one
right?
of the claimant, yeah.
And as a result of participating in the group litigation, did you recover any money?
Well, as I said, it's covered just under £7,000 from the total losses from the litigation. Again, I feel quite grieved at the fact that we had to spend money of our compensation to fight the legal case and pay and prove the post office were hiding, and we'd spend millions of our money doing the work what the public prosecutor should have been doing, because it can't be right. It can't be. I mean, the cost was horrendous.
But as a result of your participation in that group litigation, have you been able to make any application under the historical shortfall scheme?
Not at all, because
And why is that?
to be honest, there was
Is it
never.
because you're excluded from it?
I was excluded from everything. I didn't even know that the Treble 5 were going on until I had seen it in the news that the Freeths were instigating a case, because one would expect the federation to be, if it was a true federation for the union, for the people of post office work employees, they would be contacting you and say, listen, this is going on. Do you know about it, or have you done anything about it? Nobody ever contacted me. The post office certainly didn't. They were the post office themselves were probably quite. Well, it's okay. The money's paid. Our books are balanced up. End of story. But nobody ever. I didn't even hear about that until I seen it in the news that this was going on, and I contacted Freeths and said, "This is my story." And nobody, even since after that, nobody's ever contacted me either.
What avenues do you see yourself as open to you now to recover the true shortfall? Which
The true shortfall is only can only come through Howe and Co, who have I really appreciate it and sincerely appreciate the fact that they've taken this on to help some of the sub-postmasters who've been really hard done to. Without them, I'm sorry, we don't have a leg to stand on. We don't have the resources to fight the post office.
And now, Mr. Sharma, I've asked you all of the questions that I wanted to ask.
Sure.
Is there anything that you wish to say that you haven't said already in answer to my question?
Well, I would like to just make a statement and what I
do.
feel the way this could be addressed. I've got it written down, so I'll read it to the best of my ability and hopefully.
Of course, please do.
The statement would read: the most important way forward for me to The most important way for me to address this deliberate catastrophic event for me is: 1. Full compensation should be paid without delay, taking into consideration all previous losses over the years working with this imperfect Horizon system, which has caused us all so much grief in our lives. Secondly, the effect of this imperfect Horizon program has been really devastating for all the family and close friends. I find it very upsetting when I see the hellish torture endured by decent people who had given their working life to the post office and had to endure at the hands of the auditors and the managers. Even though they, brackets post office, knew they were using a system that was faulty and corrupt. However, their behaviour in this manner with decent folk who were the main mechanism of the organisation, taking into consideration that most of them were hardly earning a minimum wage after paying all the expenses of running the sub-office. Considering that the officer in charge were getting a hefty salary. I urge this Commission to recommend that this treatment should end immediately and they should treat people with respect. And finally, a full apology for all those who suffered, preferably at the post office where this tragic event occurred, failing that a local venue where a number could attend, and a written apology given to all, along with the press published apology. That's where I would like to see this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma,
Thank you very much
for your time.
for listening to me.
Sir, do you have any questions for Mr. Sharma?
No, I don't. Thank you very much. You've answered Mr. Beer's questions with clarity and comprehensively,
Thank you.
and I'm extremely grateful to you for coming to give your evidence to the inquiry.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sorry, I wonder whether we might take a short break now.
Of course, but given the constraints of the room, I think my colleagues and I will just remain here and everybody else can disappear, so to speak.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning, thank you.
So our next witness is Mr. Peter Worsfold. May he please be sworn?
If you'd like to stand up, please.
Yes, sure.
Take that in your right hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I
that
shall
the
give
evidence I shall give
shall be the truth.
shall be the truth,
The whole truth.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Please sit down.
As you know, Mr. Worsfold, my name is Catriona Hodge, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please state your full name.
Peter Worsfold,
You made a statement on the 8th of January of this year, is that correct?
that's correct.
Do you have a copy of that statement in front of you entitled
Yes.
First Witness Statement of Mr. Peter Worsfold?
Yes.
Please could you turn to the final page of your statement? Do you see your signature before you?
Yes.
Have you read your statement again since it was first made?
Yes.
Is the content true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It's up for add a year to my age. On 82.
Is it you've turned?
77.
You've had a birthday in between.
No. And I signed this on the 8th, so
Right.
it's...
I'm going to ask you shortly about your time at working for the post office. But before I do, can you please describe what you did for a living before you joined the post office?
You'd need a lot of hours to go through I've done everything from licensees to a fish farm, construction, you name it, I've probably done it.
Where were you living before you took up your role as a sub-postmaster? Where in the country were you living?
I lived in Ayrshire, South Ayrshire.
Why did you decide to move to Inverness to take up a position as a sub-postmaster?
I was okay with Inverness, I'd lived there before, and I was a parent with 3 young children, and I thought that taking up a post office would be a sound base for me to continue to support my children.
You served as the sub-postmaster of the Muirtown post office in Inverness, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
When were you first appointed as the sub-postmaster of that branch?
1997.
For how long did you serve as the sub-postmaster of Muirtown
Till
post office?
2002.
Can you describe the branch where you worked?
It was a small sub-post office inside a convenience store, and we served the local community and on the edge of Inverness.
The premises included residential accommodation, is that
Yes,
right?
I had a flat upstairs.
Is that where you lived with your children at the time?
Yes,
What type of business did you operate from your post office?
a convenience store.
Did you employ staff to assist you in running the branch?
Yes,
How many?
up to 2 in the post office. I employed others in the retail business.
Did you purchase the freehold of the premises when you took over
No,
the
it
branch?
was a leasehold.
How did you acquire the post office branch and the retail business?
With savings, and I borrowed some money from my mother.
Do you recall how much you paid for the business?
65,000.
What other investments did you make in the business at the time you acquired it?
At the time I inquired it, none of it. It was about a year later we completely refurbished the retail premises and the post office at a cost of £30,000.
Do you recall when forgive me. Do you recall when the Horizon system was first installed in your branch?
Yeah, in 2000.
Had you used an electronic point of sale system like Horizon before?
Yes.
When had you done so?
We had a point of sale in the retail business, and also I ran a salmon farm before that, and we used computers for monitoring the fish and also for running the accounts.
Did you receive training from the post office when the Horizon system was first installed in your branch?
Yes.
Where did the training take place?
It was a cold conservatory in the back of a public house in the outskirts of Inverness.
Can you please describe what the training covered?
Basically inputting transactions, sale of stamps, etc., and then reconciling them at the end, and bringing it, and that was then we were signed off.
Were you told how to correct mistakes if balancing errors occurred?
No, there was no training on how to correct any mistakes or how to even find mistakes. There was no data trail or anything of that kind.
How long did this training last?
It's about a day and a half.
Was that the full extent of the training that you received on the new system?
Yes.
Were you satisfied with the quality of the training that you had received?
Yeah, I mean, basically the training was just inputting, and that was what we done on our EPOS system in the shop. In any case, it was only, as I pointed out to the trainer, we couldn't go back and find any mistakes, or there was no data trail or anything of that nature.
Did you request any further training from the post office in light of your concern about how you would access information on the system?
No.
Do you recall how frequently you were required to balance your accounts at that time?
Weekly,
On which day of the week was balancing due to be carried out?
on a Wednesday.
Your post office branch had a licence to operate a lottery terminal, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
How did the operation of the lottery terminal affect your weekly balancing?
Well, the problem was that the lottery was on sale until 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, and the post office closed at midday on a Wednesday to do the balance. But we couldn't finalise the balance because the monies from the lottery were not available to finish the balance until the Thursday morning. And I explained this to the post office at the time, and they just said, carry on what you're doing fine.
When you say carry on what you were doing, is that to say that you were balancing on the Thursday morning?
Yes, it was balancing. The safe was on a time lock. So once we closed the post office on a Wednesday, the time lock kicked in, and it wouldn't open again until Thursday morning, just before the post office was due to open. And so the monies from the lottery, which was held in the retail business, were transferred then to and we could finalise the balance.
Why were you concerned about this delay in finalising your account?
Because inevitably lawyers always turned up on a Thursday morning. Lawyers, auditors always turned up on a Thursday morning.
And why was that a problem?
Well, because we hadn't, we wouldn't have balanced then until we could open the safe and put the monies from the lottery in and balance the Horizon system.
Before the Horizon system was installed in your branch, had you experienced any problems balancing your accounts?
No.
What system had you used prior to the introduction of Horizon?
Just a paper system, and you could always go through all your dockets and everything, and you could always balance. It was if you was out by an odd amount of £57 or something like that, that would probably relate to a docket for a pension, and so you could easily pick out discrepancies, if there was one, by the amount it was and by checking on your records throughout the week.
Did you experience problems balancing after Horizon was installed?
Yes, I don't think the Horizon system was ever designed to balance, because it was always up or down. It would never come out zero balance, because the computer just fired different amounts to you of what you should hold.
How frequently did these balancing problems occur?
Weekly.
What did you do to try to resolve them?
Phone the helpline.
What advice did you receive from the helpline?
Next to none. But our contract stated that we had to phone the helpline if we had problems. So that was and it usually took ages to get through, and once you got through, it was someone sitting on the other end that was just reading from a spreadsheet, I believe.
You said in your statement that you were advised that discrepancies would rectify themselves.
Yes, that was always that you should accept them and let it roll over, and then adjustments would be made when the discrepancy came to light.
Is that what happened?
No, inevitably it just multiplied itself and made things worse.
Did you seek any advice from your line manager at the time?
Always. The line managers there was always on the end of a telephone, but they very rarely visited the branch or give assistance in that way.
Were you a member of a federation or union at the time?
Yeah, everybody was a member of the federation, but.
Did you seek support from the National Federation of Subpost?
Yeah, I phoned the local area rep, and when I was suspended, I phoned the area rep, and she just said, "If you've stolen the money, it's your fault," and put the phone down on me.
You've mentioned in your statement receiving error notices from the post office. Can you please describe what these were?
Yeah, you used to get an error notice, and then instructions of how to correct it, or not correct it, but how to deal with it in the system. And this inevitably made a shortfall.
How was the error notice communicated to you?
Sorry?
How was the error notice communicated to you?
We just got a note come through in the post. There was an error notice that so much was short, and what we should do about it.
Did the notice ever explain what had caused the shortfall or discrepancy?
No.
What did you do to try and investigate what was underlying these error notices?
As much as you could do was phone the helpline and ask them for more details, and you could go into the system for a few days and seek, but invariably you couldn't find out anything more about it.
What did you believe at the time was causing these balancing discrepancies and shortfalls to occur?
At the time, I don't know. We was at a loss to know why they was occurring. We was told by the post office that it was because of this or because of that, or we'd made an error, or the money had gone missing. But we had no way of knowing, why we was getting these error notices.
You've mentioned at paragraph 15 of your statement that you came to suspect that your staff might be stealing money from you. Is that correct?
Yeah, after a period, when you continue to get these, then you do wonder. And, you know, you watch CCTV and everything to try and pin down what is happening to the money. And in the end, you know, I had to sack two assistants just because I believed that the money was going missing and I hadn't taken it, so I believed they had.
How do you now feel about the decision that you took then to fire your staff?
Yeah, no, I've apologised to them profoundly because, you know, I now know that it wasn't them, it was the Horizon system. But we was left with no other options at the time to wonder where the money was disappearing to.
I'd like to ask you now about some specific shortfalls that you experienced while serving as a sub-post master. You've mentioned in your statement a significant shortfall in cash occurring in the autumn of 2001. Is that correct?
Sorry, in 2001, yeah.
2000. Do you recall what the value of that shortfall was?
Yeah, it's £20,000.
How did you discover this apparent shortfall in your cash?
By an error notice.
When were you first notified about the shortfall?
In November.
I assume because it was an error notice, it was the post office that brought that shortfall to your attention?
Yes.
What, if anything, were you told by the post office about how this shortfall had arisen?
They said that I hadn't remmed it in.
What steps did you take to try and investigate what had caused this significant discrepancy?
Well, this shortfall happened in September, but the post office didn't notify me until the November, some 3 months later. Now, for £20,000 for any business to go missing, and them not notifying anybody for 3 months, that seems totally ridiculous to me. And at that time, you could only go back into the system for 40 odd days. So there was no way I could go back and check in the system what had happened at that time.
Did you ask the post office to carry out some checks for you, some searches of the system?
Yeah, they sent me a signed slip, which I had signed to receive the money. And so therefore I had to accept that I had received this money and it hadn't been remmed in.
When you say you had to accept?
Well, because they showed me a signed slip where I'd signed for the money in the September.
You've explained in your statement that the police became involved in investigating this shortfall. How did that come about?
Well, because the money was missing, so I insisted on the police being informed to try to get to the bottom of it.
What inquiries did the police make?
They come and questioned the staff and myself, but then nothing more came of it.
How did you resolve the shortfall in cash of £20,000? How did you resolve that shortfall of cash?
The post office told me to write it off in the accounts, but they deducted the money from my wages, the $20,000 from my wages on a monthly basis.
Did you challenge their advice to you to simply write this sum off and make it good by way of deduction in your wages?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you did challenge them?
Sorry?
Did you challenge them at the time when you were told that you were to write this sum off and make it good?
No, I had to accept that. I'd received the money and it hadn't been remmed in.
How much in total do you believe you paid to the post office to make good the shortfalls that were shown by the Horizon
Around
system?
£37,000.
An audit of your branch account was carried out in November of 2002, is that correct?
Before we go there, could I just be clear about the involvement of the police. As I've understood it, you asked that they become involved so that they could investigate this issue, yeah?
Yes, I asked the post office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did investigate, did they?
As far as I know, yeah, they came and visited and took
And did they
questions.
take a statement from you and things
Yes.
like that? So there was a police investigation, but the police couldn't discover what had happened either.
No.
Is that what you're saying?
That's correct,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But sorry, can I add to that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the police understood the accounting system.
Well,
Yeah, it's,
I appreciate you may not be able to throw much light on the extent of their investigation, but what I wanted to understand was, A, that you'd instigated it, which
Yeah.
I'm clear about,
Yeah.
and secondly, you did see some signs of an investigation because they came to ask you about it. And
That's
all the rest
correct,
of it.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And forgive me, just to return to something you said earlier, you said you had signed a piece of paper in September to say that the sum of £20,000 had been remmed in. Is that correct?
no, not remmed in. I had received it from the courier. It was a slip that I signed for the courier when he dropped the money off.
And that was the post office transferring the sum of cash to you to hold in
Yeah.
branch. What you were not able to establish is where the money had then gone.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because Horizon was showing that the sum was missing,
yeah,
but there were no corresponding transactions to reflect
yes,
how the money had been paid out.
yeah.
A little later on, in February 2002, an audit of your branch was carried out. Is that right?
That's correct.
Was that the first audit of your branch since Horizon had been installed?
No, sorry, is that at first?
Was that the first audit since Horizon had been installed?
Since Horizon had been installed, yeah.
On which day did that audit take place?
On a Thursday.
Who conducted the audit?
Two auditors
From the post office.
from the post office, yeah.
What time did they arrive?
Probably about 8:30.
Had you completed your weekly balance by the time the auditors arrived
No.
on Thursday morning? Is that because, as you've explained, the lottery takings had not yet been factored into your
That's
weekly
correct,
balance?
yes.
How was the audit conducted?
They counted the stock and the money, and without me being present, and told me that I was £2,000 to £3,000 short.
Did you challenge the auditor's findings when they told you that this?
I tried to explain that there was still monies to be put in, and the scratch cards and lottery transactions for the week had not been the day before hadn't been allocated to the accounts.
So when you say that there was still money to put in, you're referring to the takings from the lottery terminal?
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
Do you know what, if any, inquiries the post office made to investigate what had caused this shortfall at the time of your audit?
No.
What action did the post office take against you as a result of the shortfall showing on Horizon?
They suspended me.
What effect did your suspension have upon your post office salary?
It ceased.
After your initial suspension, you were interviewed by the post office, is that right?
Yes.
Who conducted that interview?
My line manager, David Duff.
Where did the interview take place?
In a temporary office building in Inverness.
Were you asked about how the alleged shortfall discovered in your audit of February 2002 had arisen? During your interview, were you asked to account for how that shortfall had arisen?
No, basically they told me that there was discrepancies, and that was why I was being suspended, and that they was going to investigate.
You later received a visit at your home, is that right?
Two security officers visited my home.
Were they employees of the post office, as far as you were aware?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
What were you told about the reasons for their visit?
Basically, they told me that I was being. They said that they had the same jurisdiction as the police, and they cautioned me, but I don't know on what authority they have cautioned me, and that I was being charged with false accounting, theft, and fraud.
How did you feel when you were told that you were under suspicion?
I was very worried and devastated by it.
Were you questioned by the security officers in your home?
Yeah. Yes. It wasn't really questions. They just they just told me that if I signed a statement admitting to false accounting, and if I paid the shortfalls, then the other charges would be dropped.
Was there a lawyer present with you when this proposal was put to you?
They wouldn't allow me to have a lawyer. They said I could have a friend, but they mustn't speak.
Did they caution you before you?
Yeah, they cautioned me, but I'm not sure under what authority that was, but they did caution me.
What were you told about the sanctions you might face if you were not to admit to false accounting?
If I admitted to the false accounting, they said the other charges would be dropped, and then no further action would be taken, as long as I paid back the money that was outstanding.
But if you were not to admit to the false accounting,
what
were you told might happen?
If the other charges would probably carry a sentence of imprisonment.
What did you do when you were faced with this option?
Well, I agreed to what their terms, and I was very worried because of my children. There would be nobody to look after them. So my mother lived down in the south of England, so it would have been very, very hard to have to go to prison and nobody to look after my children.
How did you raise the money to make good the shortfall that was showing on horizon?
Well, my mother and her partner transferred some money up, and I managed to draw some cash out of the bank. They give me a couple of hours to raise the money and then they returned, and I paid them over the money and signed the statement.
So this is all happening on the same day, yeah?
Yes.
In a matter of hours?
Yes.
Where you have to transfer money?
Yes.
And sign a statement?
Yes.
Without taking any advice about it?
Yes.
Right, fine.
You've explained that you were told that if you admitted the offence and paid the money back, no further action would be taken. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Were you given any written record of this deal that
No.
you'd struck with the post office?
No.
Was that the end of the matter? Were you allowed to return to work?
No, I was. My contract was terminated with the post office.
What reason were you given for the termination of your contract?
For false accounting.
So notwithstanding that you'd been told that if you paid the money back.
Yeah.
For how long were you suspended by the post office prior to your termination?
I think it was about 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, but I can't remember that.
You've explained that your salary from the post office was suspended at the same time.
Yeah.
What had been your average income from the post office during your tenure as a sub-postmaster?
About £2,000 odd a month.
The termination of your contract brought your status as a sub-postmaster to an end. But you attempted to keep the post office branch running, is that correct?
Yes, there was an arrangement put in place where another sub-postmaster, local sub-postmaster, would run the Muirtown post office.
Why did you try to keep the post office branch running?
Basically, to keep footfall into the business and to keep and try to sell the business with a post office.
Were you successful in selling the business?
No, there was a lot of controversy at the time about post offices closing and reducing the number of post offices. I think when I moved to Inverness, there was 11 post offices and one main Crown post office, and I think now there's 5 post offices, and some of them are even part-time.
Your post office branch was ultimately closed in about 2002, is that correct?
That's good. I think the last payment from them was in February 2002, yeah.
What effect did the closure of the branch have upon your retail business?
Gradually, it affected the retail business very badly. The footfall fell, and I had to take a job to subsidise the post office. The manager of the local co-op supermarket commented to me that his takings had drastically fallen since the post office had closed, because we used to pay out about £40,000 in benefits at the time a week, and to move that out of an area was devastating for everybody else around, all the other businesses.
So in addition to running the retail side of the business, you took on other work, is that right?
Yeah.
To subsidise, to supplement your income?
Yeah.
You've explained to us already that you had 3 children that you were caring for. How were they affected by the hours that you were working?
Well, I tried to shield them as much as possible, and I think the burden fell onto my oldest daughter quite a bit, looking after my twins while I was working.
How did your lease of the premises come to an end?
I had a 21-year lease, and I still have 17 years left on it, so it wasn't easy to just up and leave. But after a few years, the owner of the property, he understood my predicament, and he had looked around and he'd found a different someone in a different business to take over the lease. But this was not until about 2008 or 2009. But I was able to get out of the lease at that time.
You've explained that you made an initial investment in the purchase of the business and a further investment in refurbishing the premises.
Uh-huh.
What happened to that investment when your lease came to an end?
Total loss.
How much money did you recover from the stock that you were able to sell?
Well, the stock valuation was about 30,000, and I managed to sell it for about 6,000. The new people coming into the shop, they wanted it empty, so I had to sell off all the fixtures and fittings and completely clear the shop, so it was an empty premises.
Can you please describe the effect on your livelihood that the termination of your contract as a sub-postmaster had?
Sorry?
What effect on your livelihood, on your standard of living, did the termination of your contract as a sub-postmaster have?
Totally devastating. It was. I was working all hours to subsidise the shop and keep it running, and I had to cash in my pensions. I had to remortgage my house to pay off all the debts that I'd built up over the years.
How did these financial pressures impact upon your mental health?
Well, I didn't think it affected me, but on talking to my children and ex-staff, they've told me that I was very irritable and very. I used to row and shout a lot, so it obviously did affect me. And I even, when running my taxi, I upset customers, and they complained to the council. My taxi licence was suspended for 6 months because I'd upset customers.
Did it have any adverse effect on your social life and your relationships with your friends?
Well, I didn't have a social life. I'm sorry, I was working too many hours. So
What effect did the closure of the post office have upon your standing in your local community?
Well, I used to get comments from people using the taxi about, that I'd lost the post office and I'd stolen money from the post office. But people that knew me, my ex-staff and that, they was fine. They knew me, and they knew how I looked after my children and that. So, but other than that, outside, I don't know what my standing was.
Did you feel at the time that you were able to provide for your children in the way that you would have wished to?
Definitely not. No, it's I've never been on holiday with my children. I used to send them away to my mother's during the holidays down in England. So my interaction with my children was very limited.
Were you aware at the time that you were experiencing problems with Horizon, that there were others like you who were affected by the system?
No, and especially being up in Inverness, you feel cut off from the rest of the world, sort of thing. It's.
When did you first discover that there were others like you who had been affected?
I think 2015. I see an article in the Daily Mail, and that was when I got in touch with the JFSA through my MP and Lord Arbuthnot.
Before 2015, had you ever asked the post office or your line manager or your representative whether there were others affected like you who were experiencing problems with Horizon?
No, whenever we was on the helpline, they would always say we was the only one. We was the only one being affected. It wasn't affecting other post offices.
You decided to join the group litigation against the post office. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What, if any, compensation did you receive as a result of the settlement reach?
Yeah, we received an interim payment, or what was left out of after lawyers' fees.
How much did you receive?
About 30,000.
Did that cover the losses that you'd suffered?
No, no.
What, if any, avenues are open to you now?
Sorry?
What, if any, avenues are open to you now to seek full compensation that you're aware of?
None.
Looking back on your experience working with the post office and using the Horizon system, how do you now feel about what you experienced?
I think a computer system was put in, and it was devastating to everybody that ever used it. It's not as, I don't think it was designed ever to balance. I don't know, whose idea it was to use it, but it certainly devastated a lot of lives.
I've no further questions for you, Mr. Worsfold. Is there anything you'd like to say which I've not covered in my questions this morning?
No, I just got a statement. Sir Wynne, I purchased the Mutant Post Office and Store in 1997 as a solid base for me to raise my 3 children. The business progressed well in the first years, and we managed to give the post office and the store a complete refit at a cost of £30,000. This was a huge investment for us, but we were investing in our family's future. The post office accounts were balancing well. We had a successful audit, and things were looking good for the future. Then the Horizon system was introduced by the post office. We were told it would make the accounting a lot quicker and simpler. However, from the outset, the Horizon system was a disaster, with old and outdated equipment. The dial-up internet connections were a joke, with constant outages on top of the power cuts we experienced in the Highlands of Scotland. With no backup from the Post Office Limited, we were still our only who were and still are only interested in their image. It was nearly impossible to balance the Horizon system. There was always a discrepancy, plus or minus. With no access to the audit trail to check for mistakes or check the cause of the discrepancies. For the past 22 years, my family and I have suffered from the effects of the failure of the Horizon computer system and the outrageous unlawful treatment meted out by the Post Office. We have been merely existing to compensate the Post Office and government for their bad decisions and cover-ups. Since the introduction of Horizon, our lives changed, and running our post office became a nightmare. This consequently had an adverse effect on the rest of my business and family. We were working all hours just to keep the post office account balanced. Even now, after 22 years, we are continuing to have to struggle just to pay back the losses incurred through the failure of my business due to the actions of the Post Office and their accounting system, Horizon. We have basically been existing and living a normal life. I have been working all hours to reduce the debts. I am 77 years old. I have an interest-only mortgage, which is due for repayment this year. My son still lives with me, which helps to keep the costs down. Otherwise, I would need to sell the house and move into rented accommodation. I live on the state pension, having had to cash in my personal pension plans to reduce debts. I did not think I had been affected by this mentally, but on talking to my children and ex-staff members and the shop and post office, I become a different person. Losing my temper and shouting a lot, I also upset several passengers using my taxi who complained to the council, who suspended my licence for 6 months. This angry behaviour was completely out of character for me, and I now realise this was brought on by the stress and worry from the consequence of the Post Office's actions. We all need full compensation plus interest plus compensation for these past 20 years of hardship and existence. I do not trust the Post Office or government to oversee any scheme to achieve this. We need an independent body to evaluate our claims, to put us in a position as if this never happened. Ideal candidates for this would be Second Sight, who have already evaluated claims while compiling their reports for PO and government. So we have all just been existing for 22 years and still exist near or on the breadline. We all need this to come to a conclusion to allow us all to start living again and to enjoy the rest of our lives without this Horizon scandal debt hanging over us. Thank you.
Mr. Worsfold, have you come down from the Inverness area?
Yes.
Well, I know enough about Scotland to know that's a fair old journey, so I'm extremely grateful for you taking the time and the trouble to come and tell me about all this in person. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You may return to your seat. Thank you, Mr. Worsfold.
And I think, Miss Hodge, we will have a 10-minute break this time where we can leave the room as well.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, can we hear next, please, from Ms. Louise Dar?
Take a look around the right hand and repeat me, I swear by Allah
I swear by Allah
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please sit
Thank
down.
you.
Thank you. Can you give us your full name, please?
Mrs. Louise Patterson Durr.
Now, in front of you, I know there's a witness statement in your name. If you could take it up, please, and look at the last page. You should see that it's dated the 4th of February of this year, and there should be a signature on it. Is that your signature?
It is, yeah.
And are the contents of that witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are, yes.
Thank you very much. Now, can we start with an impertinent question? How old are you?
I'm 39.
And whereabouts are you from in Scotland?
Lindsay, just outside of Glasgow.
My Googling suggests it's 6 miles northeast of here. Is that about right?
Yep, sounds about right.
Okay. And what is Lindsay like? What is it?
It's a beautiful leafy area just outside of Glasgow. Small, well, fairly small, it's ever expanding area, and just with a small row of shops. That's the main centre of Lindsay.
Are you Lindsay born and bred?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you've lived there for the whole of your life.
Yes, well, a short break in the middle when we lived in the centre of Glasgow for 6 years. But yeah, we returned again.
Now, can you tell us about your family, if you don't mind? First of all, are you married?
I am, yes.
And what's your husband's name?
He's Rehman.
And where's he from?
He's from Pakistan originally.
But I think he's lived in Scotland for a very long time now.
He has, yes.
And how long has he lived in Scotland?
Over 15 years now.
And how long have you been married to him?
15 years or 14 years.
14 years, okay.
Yeah.
And I think you've got 3 children, is that right?
We have, yes.
Including a young one who you've left at home with him today.
Yes.
Now, before you became the Subpost Mistress of the Lindsay Post Office, what work had you undertaken?
Well, since leaving college, I was down quite a different route at the time. I worked in hotels and hospitality, front office for a short time, and then I moved into as an IT analyst for a large hotel chain. And then after that, I was made redundant from the hotel chain. And I was expecting my first child at that time.
When you were made redundant?
Yes, so the whole office were made redundant. So then we used the time with the baby, and then eventually we opened the shop in August 2012, my husband and I.
I think in the first job that you mentioned for the hotel chain, you were an IT support help desk analyst, is that right?
That's correct.
And what did that job entail?
Supporting live running hotels, whoever had reservation systems issues. Obviously the priorities were high because you may have customers standing waiting to check in or check out different things, so they had to prioritise. And
did that involve a company-wide IT system?
Yes, it did.
What was that called?
At the time it's Fidelio, but then they created a new reservation system which was rolled out across the hotels.
And being an IT support analyst, did that give you some familiarity with the operation of large-scale computer systems?
Yes, I'd say so. I think even before out with my work, I was well educated with computers, technology, all these things, but the extent of the work for the hotel company, it broadened it educated me that much more, and how to troubleshoot things as well, and how to try and resolve problems rather than just in a user sense.
As you've told us, in 2011, I think it was, you were made redundant whilst you were on maternity leave.
Yep, I was.
But in 2012, you set up a business with your husband.
Yes.
And was that called the Day-to-Day Express in Lindsay?
It is.
And was that a convenience store?
Yes.
Now, I don't think then the Day-to-Day in Lindsay itself had a post office. That was nearby.
Yes, it was about 5 or 6 doors up, just in the row of shops at Lindsay, just beside Lindsay train station.
After about 2.5 years of running the convenience store, did you and your husband decide to take over and to essentially buy the post office?
Yes, to take it over. We knew, or my husband knew, at the time, the current postmaster, and he was saying he wanted a change of career and things, so we thought it's an exciting opportunity to try and keep the post office in the most central location within Lindsay for the community, because there are quite a lot of elderly people in the area as well, all different types of people. It should just be easy to access and also to be really good for our business as well.
So it was part to ensure the continuity of a post office for the community?
Oh yes, because it is particularly hilly as well, and a couple of the different locations that we'd heard or thought could be the only option at the time, they were either almost out of Lindsay or down steep hills, so it could be troublesome for people to access and return.
It was would be a good opportunity to bring people into the shop.
Yes, it would be.
It would secure financial stability, presumably.
Yes, we were imagining the shop would be forever, really, and the kind of thing that you could either pass down the family or somebody can take over.
And what, in your mind at the time, was the reputation of the post office?
I thought at the time, it's the post office. You can't doubt it. That's how it should be. It's been there forever, in my mind.
What expectations did you have as the post office as an employer? Mm-hmm. What did you think it would be like?
Really good training, being really supportive. Any issues, they'd have somebody right on it to try and sort things out. You'd be high priority.
Now, I don't think you took over the branch 6 doors away in the sense of moving in there. What you did was move that post office to your convenience store.
Yes.
Is that a fair way of describing it?
Yes, because they'd been talking about this local post office model, so they were stopping paying actual salary, so it would just be remuneration, like commission only, in other words. So they were just trying to put it within a business so that we could make it easier to cover cost.
And so you undertook the process of moving that branch into your existing shop?
Yes.
Did substantial works have to be undertaken in order to do that?
Oh yes, it's quite a small shop. It's a long, narrow shop. It gets thinner at the back as well. So quite a lot of discussions on how it could be, how we could fit it into the shop. But we did agree on a plan, and eventually we got it all in place.
And was that paid for partially by you and your husband on the one hand and partially by the post office on the other?
Yes, well they'd really paid for their own equipment and their counter, but everything else to work hand in hand with that we had to pay for. Like a wee step up to the level and a different gate and all the shop fitting and things. So yeah, there were a lot of changes, a lot of money spent.
And I've read about a ramp outside and that kind of...
Yes. Actually, with the width of the pavement is quite narrow, so we couldn't have a ramp, but we had a folding ramp behind the counter. But again, even the secure door at the back of the shop, all these different things. It's a lot of work and a lot of money at the same time.
And so you and your husband invested your own money in carrying out these physical and security changes to the premises?
Mm-hmm. And particularly adding stronger security cameras and all these kind of things. We just had the basic ones before when it was a shop, but we had to add that as well.
Was a completion certificate eventually issued by the post office?
Yes, I believe so.
Did part of the work involve the installation of the Horizon system?
Yes.
Did that include a Horizon terminal and a Horizon pay station?
Yes.
And just help us, what's a pay station?
Well, you'd have your screen, obviously, you'd have your basic unit. You'd have your printer, which is the multifunctional printer, and then the pay point, the pay station. So that's where people can pay gas, electricity bills, all the utilities.
And is the pay station on their side of the counter or yours?
They're the keypads on theirs, but the actual putting it through is on our side of the counter.
Had you received any training from the post office before you went live in, I think, November 2014?
We received 3 days training in our Crown office in Springburn.
And that was at another post office in
Yes.
in Springburn?
So like the head office, the back office part within a different area of Glasgow.
And did you and your husband attend?
We did, yes.
And was this all about Horizon, the training, or was this much wider training about being a sub-post mistress?
No, it was 3 days, and there's not a great deal involved. It was quite basic. Part of it didn't even apply to us. Being a local model, we had the small flip-top till and different types of till for mains post office, different things that we didn't even apply to us, like different coin counters and different things. It's quite, well, it's very extremely basic training.
And so this wasn't just about Horizon, it was about running the post office generally?
Yes.
Was, so far as Horizon was concerned, the issue of troubleshooting addressed?
I asked that at the end. Some people might find it strange to ask a question like that, but it's just something you've got to be aware of, what you could do. And then I did say to them, what happens if it doesn't balance? What happens if something goes wrong? Could that not be covered? And I was just told, well, just call the help desk if that ever happens.
That was the advice that was given?
Yeah.
And I think there was a test at the end, which you passed.
Yeah.
How adequate overall did you find the training?
It was basic training, but it should have been much, much more extensive. Particularly, my main worry asking was what if something goes wrong, is because it's money involved. It's not whether our money or not. It's still money, and you can't take a chance with these things. But once we're that far in, I kind of felt alarm bells ringing, but then I was reassured so many times that just call the help desk, it'll be okay, we'll sort it out. So it was that kind of false reassurance at the time.
Now this was in, or just before November 2014. So in the events that this inquiry is looking at, quite late on in the piece, were any, or was any of the training addressed to issues with Horizon that had arisen by then?
No, they said there weren't any issues with Horizon.
You say in your statement, I did ask for further training on the Horizon system and asked the trainer who came to do the on-site training. The female trainer said we should have had more extensive classroom training, but this more limited training was delivered because of cost cutbacks by the post office. Is that right?
Yes, that was Auditor Margaret Guthrie that came to open the branch for us. When she admitted that it was cost cutting, took my breath away, and my husband's, because you shouldn't just be chucked in at the deep end, particularly when it's finances involved.
You mentioned Margaret Guthrie. Is she a lady that attended to assist with the first few days of on-site setup?
Yes, it was supposed to be the first week, business week, so Monday to Friday. But on day one, she had quite a few hours lost trying to log into the system, even in the first place.
So you say in your statement she turned up at 8 a.m. on the first day of the on-site setup, but had problems logging in, couldn't log in until 10 or 11 o'clock.
That's correct.
You say that you stressed that you weren't comfortable opening the branch without any troubleshooting training. Why were you concerned about troubleshooting?
Seeing everything coming in. I mean, you've got your stamps, your stock. When I say stock, it's all other things like your cash. Seeing all of that coming in, and you just think, I need to be more confident opening. Just been trained professionally before. Now, you wouldn't have been allowed to for previously. When I worked for the hotel, they wouldn't have left you on your own. You would at least have somebody there to support you until you were confident, until they believed you were confident. I just believe that should be the way.
And what was Miss Guthrie's response to the issues that you were raising?
Oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, we'll get there and we'll get things done, and just kind of fobbing me off.
Did a particular incident happen actually in your on-site setup training with Miss Guthrie?
Yes, she was ramming everything into the system. So in other words, inputting everything into the system, the stamps, the stock, etc. And in the first week, there was a small kind of local power cut to the pay station area where the shop till and the post office till were, which was resolved within, I think, about 20 minutes or something. It's just something had short-circuited, so we unplugged a heater or whatever just to make it okay, and we could get it resolved at a later date. But shortly after, she claimed there was a shortage of £977 and asked me if I'd taken it.
This is on day one?
Yeah. When we've been together 100% of the time, it's her responsibility to set this up. And for her to actually have the audacity to turn around and say to me, "Have you taken any money?" I don't know how anybody could say that. Sorry.
So what happened?
She then started kind of grasping at straws. Oh no, I'll go over my work. Went over everything numerous times. Don't know really what she did, because now I know you can't. It's almost impossible to see what you've done. But as an auditor, you should be able to. Then thought, oh, maybe it's an issue. The power cut, maybe that caused an issue. So she logged a call with Fujitsu for them to investigate it. That took, I think, 3 days or something at the time for them to come back and say, no, it's nothing. So that was a sleepless night on day one. Going home, she was reassuring, right, we'll sort it out, we'll need to work out what happened, it will come to light. And then came in the next day, and it was, making out that she'd fixed it. So we actually bought her a card and a gift to say thank you, we're so relieved, and it's all sorted. And it wasn't until she was then allowed to leave site that when we went to do our weekly balance, she just shoved it in a suspense account. Nothing had been resolved. And we had to pay that. Obviously at the time we were trying to save our business. You can't just say no, because if you say no, they don't let you open. They lock you out the system, etc.
Before you paid the money, did you call up your contracts manager to speak about this issue?
Just to say what is going on. We need this resolved. I didn't get much of a response. He'd said that was Brian Trotter. He'd said he would try and deal with it. I think they had long discussions on the phone, making me feel as if I'd done something wrong or taken it, when it was her responsibility in the first instance just to set up my branch for me, which shouldn't be too difficult a thing to do.
And so it wasn't you operating the system at the time that the £977 shortfall was shown? No, I don't think my login had even been created, or I'd even logged in at that point. This was the caller and auditor. I don't think at that stage you knew that she was an auditor, is that right? No, I don't think so. I wasn't really told her. I was just told that she was there to set up and support me in the first week. But you and your husband paid £977 for the post office? Yeah, so we thought, we'll pay it, it'll get sorted out, it'll come back to the surface, and that'll be us, we can move on. Did you make any requests after this incident for further training? Yes, several times. Asked the help desk, I'd phone the help desk and say, have you, just to try and chase up, or is there anything, see what happened. There was nothing.
it went on and on. Nothing balanced. I don't think ever balanced to the penny. One of the auditors, John Fraser, I'd asked him at one point when he came on site, I said, what's going on? Previously, again, I refer again to my previous job, even, or working in hotels. If you're even 50 pence out, you need to put your money in the till. You need to be accountable for everything. And he'd said at that point, oh, no, it's fine. If you're up or down by 30 quid, you're laughing. I'm just like, oh, right. It's just not good to hear that, because no business, big or small, can afford to keep putting money in a till when it's no fault of our own.
You say in your statement at paragraph 31, this incident of a shortfall that occurred on my first day of trading encapsulates the whole problem with the Horizon system and the post office response to shortfalls, even shortfalls that were demonstrably not the responsibility of the Subpost Mistress. Is that how you feel?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, they're trying to give you all the responsibility with no support, no professionalism in any way, just, okay, they're desperate just to get you to open the branch. Even from the beginning, at the interview stage, when I was expecting my first child as well, the contracts manager was willing to apparently tweak my business plan to get it through, just to get it passed. But I would have preferred them to say, okay, your business doesn't look like it's either big enough or strong enough or profitable enough or for whatever reason. I would have preferred them to say that, but they're just more interested to get somebody to take it. Because current postmasters, apparently, they'll need to give a year's notice to get out of anything, and still they're liable for it until somebody else is taken on.
Now, I'm going to come in a moment to deal with the helpline specifically, but before I do that, can we look at shortfalls? How soon after the training had finished and this incident with the £977 did you experience shortfalls?
Straight away. I'd say almost every day. Sometimes it would be up and I'd be keeping a notebook of when it was down, or any day when it was up, when it was down. And sometimes, strangely, if it was down 2 days later, it would be up by the same amount. So I thought, right, okay, maybe there's something in there. Maybe it's going to kind of work itself out. But then it just went out of control. Some days we're having to pay in 20, 30, £100, over £100 to the post office in the hope that it would come to the surface eventually.
And so how frequently did this occur?
Daily.
What did you do when a shortfall was shown? You said that you repaid. Was that money from the retail side of the business?
Yes, it would be.
You called it repayment.
Yeah, exactly. It's just money going into a black hole, really. It's just nothing ever resurfaced. When I was ever short, the first thing I would do is recount everything. Make sure I'm including the safe, the biddy safe, the till, etc. Just absolutely everything. Some nights I would have my husband there. Or my mum, or my dad. Till maybe 11 o'clock, midnight, trying to balance. Sorry. Thank you.
The first thing is, Mrs. Dahl, there's no need to apologise. The second thing is, you just take your time. If you want to take a break, we know, we've read your statement, the inquiry has, and we know that your mother sadly passed away very unexpectedly, and so speaking about it will be difficult for you.
Sorry, yep. I mean, these nights would be in, and obviously the lights would be on, and it's not a row of shops that are any kind of late night shops at the time. Customers would comment the next day, oh, is that you having problems with the post office again? I saw the light on. It's like, I think a couple of times it's local driving instructor because he's out later at night working or whatever. And it's like, oh yes, we'll sort it, we'll get there. But it's just fighting a losing battle and phoning the help desk, and they just, in other words, shrug you off. Like, what are you calling for? We're not here for balancing. It's like, what are you there for? I mean...
So what you're describing is nights of stress, worry and anxiety.
Oh yes.
Staying up late into the night, involving many members of your family,
Yeah.
trying to balance the books.
Yeah, because we had a young son at the time, somebody had to be home with him, so that's why it's quite often my mum and dad, if my husband was at home with my son, getting him to bed or whatever. When with the shop, before the post office, some nights we might go to cash and carry after closing, but you don't mind that, because that's to prepare, to be organised for the next day, to allow more family time, maybe in the morning, etc. But when it's things like this and you're just going round and round and round in circles, and it just makes you feel like you eventually think, have I done something wrong? So that's why you want somebody else to overlook what you're doing and even to count it for you, and it's just non-stop.
You've described paying money from the retail side of the business over to try and cover the shortfalls. Was money also deducted from your remuneration?
Yes, after the worst audit that they claimed a shortfall of over £10,000, they suspended me at that point.
We're going to come to the detail of that in a moment, but
that was they'd taken deductions of £877 a month when we'd staff to pay, not just ourselves as well.
in the 2 years and 6 months odd between November 14 and March 17, when your contract was terminated, i.e. for that period when you were the Subpost mistress, how much money do you estimate you paid or was deducted from your salary to make up the so-called shortfalls?
The shortfalls were in the region of £44,000.
In a 2.5 year period?
Yep.
Did you contact the helpline in relation to the so-called shortfalls?
Millions of times, and you're given one phone number for hardware. They're saying, oh, maybe it's an issue with your hardware, but you phone it's an... Sorry, I'm sniffing. It's an American phone number, and they just want to know serial numbers and this and that and the next thing, so you get nowhere with that. They're literally just to order new hardware. You phone the help desk and it's hit or miss who you get, whether they even entertain you at all. Never mind try and resolve anything, but I think the most so-called help that I was offered at any point was somebody giving me a workaround to hide an out of balance, to carry out a monthly balance, to then change it back again to try and continue. So I think they must have been well aware of what was going on and they felt sorry, but they're, at the end of the day, they're probably scared to lose their job. So what employee is going to stand up and shout in a dark room almost?
Was that the occasion when they told you that they shouldn't be doing this?
Yeah, or shouldn't be doing this, but do this and it'll let you get over. Because if you're doing your weekly balance, you can carry over any shortages into suspense account, just roll it over. But when you get to your monthly, it tells you either to make it good, put your money in, or raise can't remember what you call it, like a issue complaint, and then they'll investigate it, but you'll be locked out the system. So it's like, what do? Do you stop operating, or do you just try and move on? But they gave me a workaround to allow me to continue.
You say in your statement that the helpline wasn't at all helpful. They would say that they couldn't see the system, simply told you to do a recount and go through the balance again,
Yeah.
which you'd already done.
Yeah.
Is that the general message that you got back from the helpline in this period?
Oh yes, it's the attitude of, oh, well, it's only you, you must have done something wrong. Oh, we can't access the system, or whatever. Where I think previously, to fix a bug in the system, they had accessed, and working in an IT background before, even in those days, that many years ago, you could access with IP addresses and whatever. which I know you would be able to now. But they're claiming that they can't actually see it. But surely if it's their system, they would have copies, they would have backups, they would have all of these things. But don't know what they were there for if they weren't a help desk not there to help.
You say in your statement that they would say things like, "Oh, that's strange," when you were describing what had happened, and acted surprised that this was occurring in your branch. Did they say anything about other people calling in with the same or similar issues?
No, they just said that, oh, that's strange, you're the only one with these issues, nothing else has been reported. I was told that from the helpline, I was told that from auditors at different audits, even when I asked for support. It was always this, as if they were just programmed to say this script of, oh, that's strange, you're the only one.
You say in your statement that this made you think that you were the only sub-postmistress in the country having the issue, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to hear that I think 3 audits were conducted, one in 2015, one in 2016 and one in 2017, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Dealing with them in turn, the first audit I think was conducted on the 15th of July 2015, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And how did it come about that you were audited on the 15th of July?
Well, I had been away with my 2 children at that point to visit my mother-in-law in Pakistan. My father-in-law had passed away the year before and she was particularly lonely to see the children. So I'd gone away ensuring that the staff member at the time was confident to be running the branch with my husband while I was away. And they'd reassured me that yes, as we were working every other day, it was good, we'd spoken while I was away, etc. She'd worked for, I think, 8 years in the old post office, so it shouldn't have been any worry, any concern at the time. Strangely, the day, I think the audit was the day after I returned, but the auditor phoned to say that they were coming to do an audit. Surely an auditor would just walk in and do an audit. They wouldn't need to give warning to any branch. So I thought that's fine. I'd just gone in early to just tidy everything up and see what was going on and get the gist of things. And she came along and quickly started claiming there were losses on the system.
And is this Margaret Guthrie,
Yes.
the lady that
The same one
had the £977 issue on day one?
Yes. And it went from there. It started, oh, you've got a loss. Any professional person should keep quiet until they've come to their final conclusion, in my opinion. Oh, it's £2,000, and even at that, I was, what's going on? Absolutely not. We'll need to just recount everything. But it went up, and then it went down, and then she got her colleague in because she had to have a colleague to witness what she was doing.
And was she also called Margaret?
Yes, so I don't know her surname. It's another Margaret. And eventually, I think it settled at about £8,000 short, allegedly, at one point. And I was just thinking, what we're going to do? What is going on? But then they said, oh, no, we forgot about something, and it was something that should have taken away from the total of this alleged shortfall. But whatever they did, it added it on.
And it ended up as, I think, the final shortfall was said to be £10,461.90, is that right?
Yeah. With no, just the, I don't know, it's as if it's almost excitement of, oh no, it's this much, oh no, it's this much, not realising they need to just get to the final stage and report it. They shouldn't be chopping and changing their mind. They should be more professional than that. And
was the audit conducted within the day?
It was, yes.
Were you suspended that day?
I think it was the day after. I was locked out of the account straight away, but it took, I think, a few days
Okay.
for them to actually officially say that I was suspended.
And how long were you suspended for?
At that time, it was 8 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks.
And was a temporary sub-postmaster appointed?
No, they said it wasn't suitable because of their own choice of local model, because the shop till was a small section right jammed up beside the post office till, so they wouldn't have anybody standing in the same area as ourselves.
So you were locked out of the system, the safes were closed,
Yep.
and the that bit of the shop, the branch, was closed.
Yes. Well, initially, the two Margarets couldn't work out how to lock me out of the safe. There were instructions in a book somewhere or a folder. And they'd said, right, we'll need to take your fob. I was like, you're not taking my fob, that's the whole shop. You can't expect me not to operate. I said, no, we need to continue. We've got family, we've got a life to try and get through at that point. So eventually I had to lock them out the safe. And it's just like, just to add to the awful, awful circumstances, I even had to do that for them. Otherwise they wanted to take my shop keys. So I got them locked out of that. Obviously they put the new code in so that I didn't see it. And then, yeah, just post office had just put a sign up saying, oh, your nearest post office is Kirkintilloch or Bishopbriggs or whatever.
Were you ever given a written report on the outcome of the audit?
Eventually, I did get some report claiming a breakdown of this and this and this and this was missing, but there's no explanation to it. Just, this is it. But surely you need an explanation. You need to be told how it's come about, what's happened. I mean, we've got security cameras all over the shop. You can see we're operating correctly. We're making sure we're going from the safe to the till the way we should, etc. There's just no explanation at all.
Was the cause of the shortfall ever set out for you, i.e. a conclusive cause of the shortfall?
No.
Were you required to repay, in inverted commas, the shortfall?
Yes. Well, what they'd said was, well, unless this is made good, don't know how you could use the word good, but then you can't continue, you can't operate. And change is such a challenge for people in many ways, and for a small community like Lindsay to even start accepting the post office moving from a dedicated shop to within our shop is big change, but that was being accepted because we were local, people knew my mum and dad, knew different family, just growing up in the area. But for more change again, and then people to then start wondering what's going on, making up their own ideas, having to travel completely out of the village or of the town, it's just ludicrous. So we thought, right, we'll do whatever we can to try and save this, save our future, really.
So you paid the £10,461.90?
Yeah, of course I couldn't afford to pay it just like that. So they said, right, okay, we'll pay it monthly until we get it sorted out.
When you agreed to repay, in inverted commas again, monthly, that sum, was the suspension lifted and you were allowed to return to work?
Eventually, yes. It did take time at that point, but they did.
Was there a second audit a year or so later?
Yes.
On the 17th of May 2016?
Yes.
Was that undertaken by an auditor called John?
Yes, I think that was John Fraser.
And was this a without notice audit?
I think that was without notice. Yeah, just came along.
And what did John discover or claim to have discovered in the course of his audit?
Further losses, I think, at that point. It was, sorry if I get my dates mixed up.
That's all right.
I think that was about £2,600 or closer
Exactly
to
right, £2,684.
Right, okay. Okay, so he was claiming that, but he wasn't even looking at the most recent balance. He was doing it in the middle of the day. That's what confuses me about post office. Surely, shops operating, people operating, you need to stop what you're doing at the end of the day and tally your figures. You need to do that. But the post office say, oh, it's fine, you can find your quietest time of the day and do a balance at that point. But surely you should just do it at the end of a business day. That would make sense. And I pointed that out to him. I said, well, how does that make sense? That, he said, oh, see, and he kind of waved at my face. He said, oh, that's what I use to balance. I said, but look at the time on it. The time isn't even the most recent. Because my husband had opened the shop at 6 o'clock that morning, he walked in at, I think, about 9:10, if I'm correct remembering the time. My husband had been serving people a lot of benefits and pensions, etc., paid out early morning as well, so he hadn't even taken that into account.
I think you explained in your statement that it being a relatively affluent area, sometimes large amounts of money
yes, people could
go out.
withdraw up to £600 a day on a post office card. And we did have quite a few people taking that out each day, I think moving to other savings accounts or whatever. So lots of money was paid out from even such a small branch. It would surprise you. But he just didn't seem to sit and make sure he had the most up-to-date reports, etc. at that point.
In the course of the audit, did the auditor, John, contact your contracts manager, Brian Potter?
Yes.
Trotter.
Trotter, yep. He did. He called him from the back of the shop, just where the safe is. And at that point he said, oh, right, we can just add it on, we can just continue. It's just a small amount, that one, so we don't need any further authorisation. I thought, small amount? 2,600? It's not small in my book, but it doesn't make sense. So then my husband and I discussed it, and we just said, right, what we're going to do, we just need to, we'll give it another go, we'll just try. So just like, right, agreeing to disagree, just try and continue. So we agreed to have that added on to paying it back monthly.
So adding on to the debt, as it were, that you were servicing?
Yes, which we're just, I think, coming towards the end of.
You say in your statement that you were told by John that you couldn't reopen the branch without first agreeing to repay the alleged shortfall, and that you agreed only because you felt you had no choice and you had already made big changes to the shop in order to accommodate the post office counter.
Oh yes, I mean, the shop we started it was an empty unit when we first moved in, but that was the kind of labour of love building it between us. And just starting out together, and just such lovely memories of family being in there.
Was this the occasion that John said that you should be lucky or you should be laughing if you only had a few pounds down?
Yeah, he'd said at the front desk as well at one point, because I had questioned at one point a relationship manager, so I can't even remember when. I think it was definitely after the big audit. This relationship manager, Jamie Hall, stepped in, and he seemed to be more honest about things, and he said he's been brought in to try and resolve any communication problems that the Subpost masters or Subpost mistresses felt that they had with post office, and he was a good communicator, and he was doing some training with the staff that we had, etc. And I'd phoned him at one point to say, look, I don't know what to do, like we're just not balancing ever. And he'd said, oh, that's strange, here we go again. Oh, that's strange. Oh, I've been in contact with quite a few people, and I mean, one lady quite local to you, she always balances to the penny. And I thought, all right, okay, just another adding ingrate insult, just yet again.
Now, you agreed to pay this money there and then. Were you suspended on this occasion following the second audit?
No.
So this gets added to the debt and you pay it
they
out
didn't
of
seem
your
to think it was
remuneration?
serious enough to suspend me for at this point.
I think you were audited for a third time on the 3rd of February 2017.
Yeah, that's correct.
And were the auditors there called Brian and Caroline?
Yes, that's correct. I think Brian came first on his own, and then, like they said previously, it was what they had to do if there were any issues or whatever. Somebody else had to come along and witness that, and that's when Caroline was called to come, but she lived locally.
And so, when both of them were in the shop, did they tell you that, again, you had got losses?
Yes, they were claiming losses, but Caroline actually said to me quietly behind the counter at one point, oh, well, because she seemed lovely, she was really nice lady, and she'd said to me, oh, come on, I know it's a difficult time, but something along the lines of, oh, you'll get there. I mean, there are so many issues with it that we're aware of. So that was kind of reassuring me, as if, right, don't worry, it'll sort itself out like we'd been hoping all of that time.
You say in your statement that you said to Caroline the situation was ridiculous, and she replied that many people had said this.
Yes. Trying to kind of reassure me, as I say, as if, oh yeah, we'll get it resolved. But she was the only person to admit that they knew of any issues whatsoever. At that point, they were always categorically saying, oh, it's only you, there are no other issues, oh, the system's robust, the system's this and that and the next thing. When if you were even out of balance by, for example, I don't know, a book of first class stamps, unless your numbers were out, you couldn't work anything out. You'd have to print a different report for every single item on the system. It's horrendous.
Did there come a time when they told you what the final alleged shortfall was?
Yes, they did eventually, and I just at that point I just said, well, I can't do any more. You've just drained us.
And was that amount £6,870.85?
Yes, that's correct.
And had that increased along the way in the course of the audit?
Yes, I mean nothing's clean cut with them, with the auditors or with the post office or whatever. But as I say, I think it would be a lot more professional in any circumstance to wait until you've reached your final supposed shortfall or discrepancy.
Were you locked out of the safe and the tills again?
Yes.
And the Horizon system?
Yes.
And were you suspended?
Yes, I was.
Now, I think ultimately your contract was terminated by the Post Office on the 27th of March 2017.
Yes.
Before that happened, did you attend a formal interview?
Yes, I did.
Whereabouts was that?
It was the post office building, or post office within a building in Queen Street. But they insisted I went along the day before my mum's funeral. And my contracts manager didn't even have the decency to turn up. He sent David Southall, who I'd never met before.
What did they accuse you of in the interview?
They were just Brian Trotter even beforehand, and we had to sell our car at one point to try and make ends meet after that. And with cash and cow to get to, etc., and with children, as you can imagine, it's the most difficult thing to do, to then accept support from family in their car and different things. But at that point, they were just more interested to try and get me to admit something. Brian Trotter said probably at least 7 or 8 times within phone calls, did you falsify the books? Did you falsify the books? And I was like, no, I didn't. I'm not going to admit to anything because I haven't done anything wrong. All I've done is put my life and soul into it. Like we did with the shop. I mean, the shop was thriving, and my husband and I just loved doing everything about it. Just working together, and I mean, the shop for in total 6 years. It's amazing. So many married couples couldn't do that. think we're proud of ourselves that we could, live together, work together, do everything together. And we're just lucky that we do have each other. And we're that strong that obviously it put pressure on our marriage at that time, just with business, money worries, financial worries are just the worst in the world. But at the end of the day, we're going strong, and we get such a lovely family unit. But without that, I don't know what would have happened.
Did you try and sell the post office?
We tried to we put signs up, we tried to sell it, or tried to sell the shop. Sorry, the post office wasn't actually to sell as such, it would be to pass on to somebody, but
Yes.
you'd feel responsible doing that. So we're just trying to sell the shop, but obviously nobody wants a shop that's got a shell of a post office sitting in it that's had issues. And eventually...
So did the post office remain closed? You tried to carry
Yeah.
on running the convenience store?
Yeah, we tried that, but by that point, we'd a wee tiny till and big unit for the post office, and people weren't kind in any way either. I mean, it got to a point that one customer came in and was racially abusive towards my husband and threatened he's going to return, and it actually went to court. It was that terrifying an ordeal. As it happens, I was standing outside talking to a local man who knew my mum, and he'd an elderly mother. My mum wasn't elderly, but he'd an elderly mother, but he was saying it doesn't matter what age they are, it's the greatest loss in your life, etc. And that man got found guilty because he was shouting that he wanted stamps. Is it worth for him to be so abusive? And he was a teacher of some kind of education. And to imagine he's screaming about that, about stamps, he actually gets a criminal record, and we had to turn up time after time when they're not ready in court or they're not whatever, and it's more wasted time. So eventually we just had to plan what we're doing for the future. And I got a job within Glasgow city centre.
So just to complete, you closed the shop?
We did. Well, I got this job, and my husband, he adored the shop like we both did. But I think we were both kind of in denial that it'll be fine, we'll try and work with it. But everything was just going downhill. We couldn't pay our suppliers, we couldn't pay different people. So I actually got this job and then just said, look, I have to do this. We can't last much longer. So kind of against both of our own wills, I had to just get this full-time job working in a call centre in Glasgow, and it's the only thing that could get us through. So eventually, in the next couple of months, my husband tried to sell off the shelves and the stock and the whatever, but you get pennies for it. Nobody wants to open cases of anything or open pre-bought alcohol or different things, because we tried to recover the business in the last, I think, 4 months by getting a licence, and it just wasn't working. People just don't want to come into a shop that's got a reputation at that period, at that time that it had.
And had the reputation travelled around the local community?
Oh, of course. Around the kind of shop community, it's always a small world when you work in IT or you work in shops, you work in whatever. Obviously, people hear things through the grapevine, isn't it? And it's horrendous. We just couldn't sell it. We tried posters, we tried it on Facebook, we tried it here, there and everywhere, and there was just absolutely no interest whatsoever.
When you closed, did you close owing money, debts?
Oh yes, I mean, still to this day we owe £1,000 to HM Revenue. We're paying VAT when we can, it's tax, it's outstanding. Even at the most difficult time when we were having money deducted, we most likely probably could have got things like tax credits to help with living costs, different things. But our accountant at that time put the deductions through as income. So they looked like we were earning multi-thousand pounds, more than we were, so it actually cut any financial support from us as well.
So to
So
this day,
any working tax credits disappeared, child tax credits disappeared. There was nothing, and I was phoning, explaining, and they obviously thought I was just saying anything to try and get money. But it's just, I couldn't bear taking any more financial support from my wee dad, because he's retired. I shouldn't have to.
so to this day, you're still paying off debt
Oh yes.
to HMRC.
HM Revenue, we owe Dad an awful lot of money. We owe our accountant won't even finish. Close up any of the books. We've got tax returns still to have done, but obviously owing him so much money, saying, well, it's a kind of vicious circle. Well, I won't do the work until I've got money, which makes sense. He's a small business as well. Get newspaper supplier that we owe money to. We've got lots of things. Fortunately, we managed to kind of close up a lot of things, but renting a house at the time as well, it was just such pressure. Rental properties, obviously, it's just a lot more expensive, and so many things that we just need to have resolved. We can't hanging over us much longer.
You told us about the £44,000 shortfall repayments that you had to pay in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And there are consequentials to that because it puts you in debt. It means you can't pay suppliers.
Yep.
You can't run your retail business as you wish. Aside from the financials, did this have an impact on yours and your husband's relationship?
Oh, of course, at the time we're just always worried, always trying to do more when you think you can't do any more. Even having your own business, anybody will tell you that it's your life. It's you getting up at 6 a.m, sometimes 5 a.m, sometimes earlier to get to a cash and carry the minute it opens, to get your fresh items, get to the shop, etc. But what more can you do? You're just trying to constantly do something to fix all these financial issues, and with children as well, and it's horrendous.
You say in your statement that although he wouldn't admit it, your husband's mental health has suffered as a result of this.
Of course, it's just, say more than anything, it's man pride, isn't it? In a way, it's just, he loved it. He'd always wanted a shop, and his dad had been in the shop before he died. And I think just for that, those memories to be destroyed as well. So it's, yeah, and having to face people. But fortunately, we are getting this opportunity for people to see that it wasn't any of our wrongdoing of our own. And it's just a thing that I've just kind of closed down. I just don't talk to a lot of people about it.
You say in your statement, I and my family had to take the fall for the post office's wrongdoings. Is that how you feel?
Oh, definitely. I actually had asked, probably at each audit, just with the kind of investigative head that I've got most of the time, that, well, what about this or what about that? Different questions. Can you check about this shortage or that shortage? Or obviously they wouldn't let me in the system to investigate things. They wouldn't even try and answer my questions. It was just like, we'll just leave it long enough, we'll ignore her, and then we'll move on and whatever. After the 2015 audit, they'd said there were certain, I said, well, what about checks? Because checks are posted, sent away, not in a secure way whatsoever. And I think that should be a lot more secure. But then some of these came to light and different things, and my questions weren't even answered. They didn't even attempt to answer them.
The last thing I want to ask you about, you were a party to the group litigation.
Yes.
And indeed, I think you were one of the 6 lead claimants.
I was, yes.
And you gave evidence before Mr. Justice Fraser in the High Court in London.
Yes, in 2019.
And for your note, sir, we can see what Mr. Justice Fraser made of Mrs. Dar in paragraphs 329 to 364 of his judgment number 3 relating to common issues as to your honesty, truthfulness and credibility?
Well, I think it deserves to be said publicly that he was very complimentary about it, wasn't he?
He was. And indeed what he thought of the Post Office's cross-examination of you. As a result of your participation in the group litigation, did you receive any money?
She's received a few different instalments that just got us by at the time. Didn't pay off any debt. Well, if it did, it hardly touched on it. And it's not good enough. We shouldn't be in this position. We don't want a windfall. People keep saying, "Oh, when are you going to get money?" It's like, no, it's not extra money. It's not winning the lottery. We just want to get back to zero. We just need to clear off all of that the post office have caused. We just shouldn't have to be struggling through.
Have you made any application under the historical shortfall scheme?
No, because we're not allowed to at the moment.
And why aren't you allowed to?
Because they have excluded the 555 sub-postmasters, which I was one of. I think probably using us as an example, probably. Well, we're the ones that highlighted this and brought it to light. And at the moment they're saying because we had compensation paid out. No, majority of that was paid for legal fees. And we've still got all of this outstanding, so it's just ludicrous that we were excluded. They've now agreed that, okay, they will include us in a shortfall scheme. So is that another fight? Yet another application, yet another year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or more to be covered up? Why should we keep having to fight over and over again? It's difficult enough having to do all of this today when I've spent since 2019 trying to deal with it all again and put it kind of at the back of my mind thinking, oh, it will come, it will come, it will come, and it's embarrassing to the people that we owe money to, and HM Revenue aren't the friendliest when it comes to owing them money, all of these things, so just lucky that I've had support from Alan and his colleague that have helped me write to HM Revenue and try and deal with these things, at least to put it on hold. So yeah, we just need to get there eventually and get things cleared and move on.
And Mrs. Dodd, they're the questions that I had to ask you. Are there any other issues that you want to raise arising from questions that I haven't asked? Anything you want to say?
Could I read out? I've prepared a statement. Would that be okay?
Yes, of course.
Just a closing statement. I don't think there's anything else because actually there's one other small audit, if you don't mind me mentioning, as well. So I was sitting last night just trying to write notes so that I don't forget anything, and all these different auditors' names popping up. And the most shocking thing is after being locked out of the system, physically locked out the system, can't open the safe, there's nothing in the till, nothing accessible. I think every audit they would log on and there's a discrepancy. It's just, you couldn't make it up, these things. And the fact that all of the post office staff seem to just have it drilled into them, make out that they're the only ones. Make it, I mean, to ask me in my first week, have you taken money? It's like, I felt like saying, well, have you? You've been with me this whole time. How is it possible? It's disgusting just what is going on. As I say, even people at the playground going into school and people that you chat to, what are they going to say? Like, they just say, oh yeah, I heard things have happened, blah, 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 but they don't actually realise the full extent of these things. And they will presume, even some local people, you've heard them saying, or they've stopped talking to you, or they've cut you off, or one lady was shouting at my husband across the counter. It's like not realising we're going through the most difficult time of our lives. Yet she was one of the ones that should have been more caring. So yeah, people just make up their own mind no matter what. But I'll read out this.
Yes,
if
please
that's
do.
okay. So for Sir Wynne, we as a family were affected directly in so many ways, financially, emotionally, and losing our business, all due to the actions, or should I say lack of actions, by the Post Office Limited. It is vital that we receive our compensation for losses and the harm we suffered, but now, without any further hesitation, without any delays, any excuses, any bigger news. At the time, I think there was, I don't know, if it wasn't football, it was something else, and it seemed to be nothing was in the press. And without any hesitation, fair compensation would allow us and hundreds others to pay off the debts that we incurred due to the alleged shortfalls claimed by the Post Office. It would allow us to try and rebuild our lives and help close this horrendous chapter of our lives. But one of the worst things to add on was that 3 years prior to the group litigation that I was a part of, as we discussed, Paula Venables, the Chief Executive Officer of Post Office, received in total £3.6 million in bonuses. And this was at the same time that a local model had been introduced to try and save money for the Post Office, so that she could look good, make lots of profit, but actually doing this to us. So this did lead to millions of pounds of profit for the Post Office. Yet sub-postmasters' remuneration was less than minimum wage when it was calculated because of the long hours we work. The sub-postmasters had no support. We had no bonuses, not even any thanks. No profitable services were removed one by one. So people coming in, we were trying to get people to come in and pay their bills and do different things to try and make pennies on these to make an income. If that wasn't bad enough, to top it off, Paula Venables then appeared on the Queen's Honours list to receive a CBE the January after the December that the group litigation won in the High Court, revealing this scandal. I just can't see why Ms Venables was given this award by the Queen. And I know it has been questioned, but it must be moving into a different job at the time. It was just so suitable. But I would like to just finish off by saying if anybody should receive any type of award, any public acknowledgement for his tireless efforts, campaigning, hard work, and decades of compassionate investigation, it's Alan Bates. And he was the one that founded the group litigation in the first place, because he identified issues, and he has been doing all of this for, I think, over 20 years now. So I'd just like to say thank you to Alan for all of this hard work, and thank you for your time, Sir Wynne. Thank you.
Mrs. Dyer, can I thank you for giving your evidence to us? So they are all my questions. Do you have any questions of Mrs. Dyer?
No, thank you. Mrs. Dyer, you've been prepared to give evidence in a very public forum on 2 separate occasions now, which is much to your credit, and I'm very grateful for the integrity of your evidence, which is self-evident, and the upset that, in part, it's caused you. But thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So could we say 2:10?
Certainly.
Thank you very much.